In Russia, widespread rallies against planned pension changes coincide with local mayor elections. CGTN's Dan Ashby joins us live from Moscow with more. Dan, let's start with these protests. What messages are they sending?
Well, I think just the anger that many people have about these proposed changes to the retirement age, which is to raise the retirement age here by many years. You've seen thousands of people across Russia take to the streets today here in Moscow. In Moscow, relatively small numbers, around about 2,000, but also in Yekaterinburg and in about 80 cities and towns across Russia. So the other point worth mentioning is that these protests have been going on for weeks, and they've really created and tapped into a frustration people have that the government is raising the pension age.
We have good profits from pensions, but the government still rakes away from there, and nobody is held responsible. Why don't they create laws that prohibit emptying the pension fund? They just keep emptying it, and that's it.
What we've seen, though, is also clashes with the police. They have arrested about 300 protesters. They clashed with protesters in St. Petersburg. Here in Moscow, the whole rally was unsanctioned in the first place. They simply didn't let it go ahead. And they've arrested the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, the man who called for these protests, before even the protests start. So clearly the authorities were worried about these protests taking place. They are rattled by them, but they can do little about that anger that people have about their pensions, rather their retirement age, simply going up.
So then how much of a challenge is this to President Putin? Because we know that he went on television, national television, to appeal, to say that he's willing to make concessions.
Yes, exactly. And that is relatively rare here in Russia. You don't see those type of State of the Nation addresses, but he was sufficiently concerned that he felt the need to try to explain these reforms and come out and cautiously back them. Because at first they came from the government and they were proposing raising the retirement age for women, for instance, by about 8 years, up to 63 years of age. Putin's popularity then dropped by 15 percentage points. It's one of the biggest drops in about 13 years. And bearing in mind that President Putin has relatively strong ratings, this has really rattled him. He came out and made that State of the Nation address. He proposed maybe making the retirement age a little bit less high for women and making other modifications, which I think he hoped would soften the blow. But the problem is he's had to back these proposals, if indeed he didn't come up with them in the first place, as most people suspect, because he needs to fund his really ambitious election pledges. So he is supporting them. People are not happy. They're going to have to work longer in a country where people have relatively low life expectancy.
Tough reforms for Moscow. Thank you so much, Dan Ashby.